Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this rather odd mini video on the Long Voyage. As you may have noticed, there is no episode 33. That is because after we uploaded episode 33, we found out that my audio had not been recorded at all night, which meant that all people could hear was what everyone else was saying, meaning the reactions of the players to what I was telling them and what I was explaining was going on. So the storyteller was gone and the reactions were still there. That left a very, very, very strange video. And as soon as we found out that this was the case, we had to make a decision whether to leave it up there in its broken and mangled and awful form, which would just confuse anyone, or if we would in fact remove it. And the decision was made to take down the broken episode and upload this instead. So I'm joined now by our usual recapper, Chris, who's going to try to explain what happened during that entire session, with the occasional odd help from me in case in case something is forgotten or overlooked. So, Chris, this is probably the strangest one I've ever asked you to do, but could you give us a recap?
Absolutely, of course. Before we get on to that, though, I must say that the actor within me, the trained actor within me, thinks that we could have perhaps kept the episode up as some kind of surrealist theatre piece, but no, it's all good. We honestly had no idea until just before we sat down to record the next session that this was the case. So yeah, if any of us had actually gone back to listen to our own episode to check on details or things beforehand, we probably would have spotted it sooner. So last time on the Long Voyage, well, the events at Ting back in Vannes were still progressing, and our intrepid adventurers, some of which had competed in competitions and done relatively well at, decided collectively, after some talking about this, that, and the other, to go and do some shopping. Because hey, we've got all this lovely money that we've pilfered from the Green Shores and from a few other places. Why not spend some of it?
It's not just been pilfered. In some places, you've even earned it legitimately.
Honest bloody money here, yes. This place. But yeah, so what we did is, we decided, being Southlanders and loving all things practical, we universally invested in upgrades to our armour. So we've got finest quality Southlander metal armour, made by the famous smiths, which are kind of like a caste of people in the Southlands that make only the finest weapons and armour and various items of war, and nobody else can actually be called a smith. You can have blacksmiths, but the smiths are special and unto themselves. So we bought some of their wares, and we also bought some new weapons, although that varied on whether or not we got them from the smiths, because their specialty is in metalworking.
Yes.
So, for example, while Uva was able to perhaps get something in regards to her hammer, Sindri, being first and foremost an archer, needed to go and see separate people, a bowyer and a fletcher and arrowsmith, that sort of thing. So we all got those upgrades. Because Gilsey wasn't there last time, I imagine come the next session we're going to sort out the items he acquired.
Yeah, of course.
Because we can't imagine we don't want to leave him out in terms of getting some armour upgrades. That's quite important. There was also some inter-party roleplay about talking about what we were going to do for the future in regards to whether or not we would continue voyaging after we'd taken part in this war we were going to go up against with the Sword of Strife and the Phalanx in particular, because that had been agreed upon that all the forces of the Raven Lady would finally go to war with the Sword of Strife and his forces. Which then led, obviously none of us reached a resolution, because it's one of those things that none of us really want to think about, because we don't want to split up from our group, but then we might also want to settle down, so it's tough. Real life choices, We were then summoned back to Gungavir's Great Hall, and we were basically explained that there was we were going to be taking part in some, I'm not sure what you'd call them. But basically, we were meant to act and go and do some various covert operations in preparation for the main conflict, in regards particularly to the Phalanx. There were two options we could have picked. There was a large food store further into the country that needed to be eliminated to basically starve out the sort of Strife's forces, and there was a port further along the coast that the Phalanx held that had a lot of their ships in that we were meant to infiltrate and not necessarily burn down the port, some of the port, yes, in regards to, again, stores and things, but crucially we were also meant to destroy all of the Phalanx ships so that they had no means of defending against the incoming force of ships that Gangrio and her forces were going to be sending in. And of course, it meant that there was no means by which that the Phalanx could escape to the sea. So, both of which were vital objectives. In the end, we all decided to go to deal with the port, in terms of the player characters, and then some other important NPCs from Orma's crew would be sent to deal with the food store. We were told that we had better set out as soon as possible, ideally that evening. Although several of us decided that we had a few things to set in order before that happened, and we'll get back to that in a bit. But yes, so ultimately what happened was, I think that Foley had another conversation with the skull of the woman he acquired in the Lotus Empire.
Yep.
And she was fascinated at the place she now found herself in, and they discussed what would happen in the future in regards to her skull being used in other ways, whether or not that they would be able to enhance her abilities by making a staff out of the magical wood we acquired on the Lion Coast and her skull, and whether or not we could find a magical soul inclined to use their soul as fuel to make that magic staff work. I imagine in some ways being a magic staff made up of two magical souls would be quite nice, because at least they'd have someone to talk to, unless you couldn't stand each other, of course, and then that would be hell.
Yeah, you'd be caught there forever.
I mean, yeah, but surely that is better than being stuck at the bottom of being stuck as a magic sword, for example, at the bottom of the ocean by yourself forever.
That would be really awful.
Yes. But that was certainly discussed. Ilva sang beautifully, so beautifully, in fact, that even the Raven Lady was like, yeah, they can go tomorrow. This is nice now. She didn't admit it because, she's the Raven Lady. She can't afford to appear soft to anyone, otherwise they'll have to be killed.
Indeed.
And Sindri decided to try and put an element of his past behind him. Specifically, he wanted to establish to himself and to his teenage sweetheart, Rana, that he could move past the pain he'd felt when he had a crush on her and when she had basically appeared lost to them. And they had a long conversation about their lives, where they'd gone, about what it would mean best to move forward. Sindri also made a bit of a tit of himself in regards to getting the name of the first ever battle maiden mixed up with the name of the man who had driven her to become a battle maiden in the first place. And he was very flustered about that, as was his player, but these things happen. And yeah, we basically all set our affairs in order, got our equipment together, had a plan of action put in place, apart from Gilfie, who wasn't there. And last we left off, we were going to spend the night, with Ilva singing her beautiful, beautiful song, and then come the morning, we would all head out to travel to this far-off port. I believe we were given some horses to make the journey as expedient as possible, because obviously speed is key at this point if we're going to war.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's pretty much everything that happened. Was there anything that I missed, or that you?
No, I think that's a pretty good summation of what happened last time. So we shall leave it at that. And once again, I do very much apologize for this rather unorthodox solution to the problem. But it's either that or listen to, as Chris just put it, surrealist theatre. It's a bit like Garfield without Garfield. Look that up, guys, if you haven't seen it.
There is actually a lovely comedy sketch that I can say it reminds me of is a Rowan Atkinson sketch, for those who know the comedian Rowan Atkinson, where he plays the proprietor of an Indian restaurant and he mimes having to deal with a horde of drunken football hooligans who've come into the restaurant to order dinner, and he does it so well. It's fantastic bit of deadpan solo comedy. I can heartily recommend it.
Yep.
But yeah.
So I will end this here, and we will see you for more The Long Voyage in episode 34, hopefully with audio from all of us.
We will be checking that. Don't worry.
Shall be checking that. So yep, by all means, please do continue to listen in. There are only a few episodes left. So for us here now, bye.
Bye bye.